So recently, I had the absolute pleasure of doing my podcast episode for All in Trauma with Mario Salvador. Mario is a very well published, respected therapist and teacher and trainer living and working in Spain. And he had some beautiful ideas to share with us about the idea that there's no lotus without mud. Mario goes on to explain this in terms of trauma work and the way in which to work into our greater sense of healing, our development, our aspirations, and our beauty. We have to work with the mud too. We have to get in there and work with trauma. But it's such a complex thing to do. It's hard to do on one's own. And even as very skilled and experienced therapists, sometimes we have to negotiate the most difficult of circumstances. And this is what he talks to, how we begin to do that, how we move beyond the terrain into the deeper psyche to help to process some of the stuff that may keep someone stuck, unlocked in their trauma, in difficult relationships, and in their emotional and physical pain. And he talks about the physicality of doing trauma work, the way we have become to rely on thoughts and ideas of emotions as who we are, and how true trauma work holds the frame, supports the client in co-regulation to work deep into the embodied sense of trauma. And from there, a beautiful lotus can grow within the healing. He talks about this in terms of neurobiology, neuroscience, the soma, the somatic, the incarnate. He talks about it in terms of spirituality and relationship. You can see the full or hear the full podcast on my channel or in Trauma, which is on Apple, Spotify, and your usual podcast providers. But listen to this just to get a flavor of where we might be going. It reminds me of, I don't know if you have looked at some of the work of Ian McGilchrist there, who talks a lot about the brain and neuroscience, and not without oversimplifying it, but he does talk a lot about the difference between the right and the left side of the brain. And it's not that they're doing different things, but they do things differently. So although he's saying all of the brain is involved in everything we do, the left brain is always looking to separate stuff off in a technical way to try and look at the what of everything, where the right brain is much more interested in the how of everything. So the left brain's going, what is water, and breaking it down, and it's H2O, and there we go. The right brain is how, how is a river flowing, and how is the sea moving with the moon, all these. So one is a very individualistic, compartmentalized way of looking at things. The other one is much more interrelational and interdependent way of looking at things. And the point he makes, which I think ties in with what I'm hearing you saying there, is the more fearful we become, the more we move into our left brain, where we're trying to over control and reduce everything down so we can control it and understand it. But in doing so, in understanding it, we're actually moving away from what we're originally trying to discover. So we become more and more reductionist. And in doing so, become more and more controlling, where we lose the richness and the diversity of true life. And we start to work from a very fearful place. And he was saying, like you were saying there, the analytic and technical part of our brain is important, but only then to feed it back into the other part of the brain, the right side of the brain, that can then incorporate that intelligence into true life again. But more and more so as humans, we're staying in the left brain, control. And with control comes a lot of oppression. And we've seen that happen. It's in the world now more and more, perhaps,
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the signs and the consequences of this way of thinking, that the humankind is wanted to control nature and wants to control genetics and wants to control everything. And now we are just suffering these consequences with the climate change, we have more and more people depressed, more and more people that consume drugs, more and more people that use violence to resolve and to deal with conflicts, and so many things that we are now that's kind of perversion of our human nature, you know. But it comes to my mind also the research of so many important researchers, such as Antonio Damasio, for example, that says, well, the body is the organ of experience, and the mind just thinks about it, makes a map about the experience, but it's not the experience. It's just a representation, you know. I think we lose this idea. We forgot this, you know, that our ideas are not reality, are not the experience, are just a representation. And it has a good intention, and they have their own functions to help us to deal with practical things in life. But if we confuse, and if we just believe that these, our ideas, are the experience, we are losing this sense of vitality, that life is just a river that flows continually. When a creation is a creation, every second, every millisecond is not predictable. If we see this in nature, this is amazing. There is not any flower like any other, you know. Every element is different, but it's also the manifestation of life. So life is always pushing, growing, flowing, and this is a process, not a concept.
Lovely process, and reminds me of the kind of Taoist ideas of flow and continual movement and process, and there's no beginnings or ends, just a continuous movement. And you were talking about bodies of water and also human bodies as well, and that the body is actually who, well, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but the body's the place where we can get closest to who we are, rather than the thoughts about who we are. Is that right, Mario? Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. Following Antonio Damasio's teachings, he talks about the proto-self. You know, the first idea, the first sense of who we are is we feel in our bodies. You know, if we have a nice, good enough caretaker that take care of us, that offer loves, good food, good cares, we feel we deserve. We feel our dignity. We feel okayness in our bodies, because we build ourselves from the bottom up. As the baby is mainly a subcortical creature, full of physical sensations, and these physical sensations just inform the state of the body. Then later we can put the emotional qualities over the physical sensations. Later on, they arrive the beliefs, the concepts, and finally the purpose, the meaning, you know. And we build ourselves from the bottom up. So the core of who we are is in our body. The rest are different layers. You know, David Grant, I know that you were interviewing David a week or 2 weeks ago, is now emphasizing brainspotting as a neuro-experiential process, you know, that matches with this idea that our processes begin in the base are physiological, neurological, and then affect the rest of our layers, the dimensions of who we feel, who we are. You know?
Yeah, I've enjoyed that development that David's been putting forward about much more of a kind of not conceptual shift, but a conceptual clarity, I suppose, about the meeting of the neuro, which I think he expands into the neurobiological, the nervous system, and everything therein, everything ancient within us, really, and the experiential, the sensory kind of experience and interpretations around that, and the importance of the two meeting. And it's been really lovely seeing those. And I'm also then it wants me to, and obviously I had a chance to speak with David about this, but I know you're a very, very insightful person and very open to kind of spiritual understandings of who and how we are. And I suppose part of the neuro isn't just that we're body and brain, but where what this means and what resides within this. And I've, been listening to some and enjoying some beautiful discussions about the spirit, and whatever people want to consider as the spirit and the soul, and how and where that resides within us, how we can find it, tap into it, or enjoy the resource of our spirit within ourselves. And some of the lovely discussions I've heard about, we can never have answers to, but things like, does the spirit reside within the body? Does it reside within the thoughts, within the brain? Does it reside outside the body? There's big questions, but I've wanted to ask you that anyway, because I'd be fascinated to see if you've got any thoughts or feelings around those kind of ideas around our spirituality, really, and how that may manifest.
Yeah, I think that we have in our language the word incarnation. Incarnation. Yeah. The title of my book is Beyond the Self. Beyond the Self is pointing out that beyond our ideas of ourselves, there is another dimension of who we are. This is beyond any relational experience. Even before we have any relational experience, we already are, so that experiences are shaping, or we adopt concepts, beliefs about ourselves, but this is not who we are, So this is kind of hiding this real essence of who we are. I like the word incarnation, because for some reason our soul arrives and incarnate in this reality, this materialistic reality, to provide us with experiences. And thinking on the experiences are kind of the theater to experiment with reality and to grow, and we are dedicated to the healing of the trauma. I like this statement, this motto of Thich Nhat Hanh: there is no lotus without mud.
No lotus without mud. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no. We like in our culture the lotus, the flowers, the happiness. We try to deny our suffering, our shadow, our mud, but you do not have the lotus if you do not accept the mud. So that's a very beautiful metaphor of how embracing, possessing, or inhabiting our experience, our suffering, it will arise a deeper sense of who we are, a deeper sense of our humanity. And we have witnessed this so many times in trauma healing, with or without Brainspotting, that when we unburden and release the energy of the suffering, it comes a deeper sense of joy, love, compassion, altruism, spontaneity, liveliness. That's the treasure of our humanity. And it push us to a deep, higher dimension as human beings. So I think that the spirituality is something that is always there inside of every one of us. And when we clean the clouds, the trauma put over our deeper sense of our soul, this nature, spiritual nature, just appear and just goes into higher levels. And I think this is the work we should do, To nowadays is also known this spiritual bypass. So many people, because trying to escape from the trauma, go into spirituality just trying to find a solution. This is not the good solution, because the science of the spirituality is trying to fly away from the pain. It's not stable, never stable. Could even be worse, because when you go into these states of mind, meditation, the defenses lower, and what is underneath the defenses just pop up.
Mm.
And if the person is not ready to prepare, their nervous system is not prepared to just handle these emotions. These strong emotions do not find anybody to hold them. Anybody inside the person. You know?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. That's lovely. I was just thinking about you using the word incarnation there as a beginning, and
Yeah.
I love that. And I was just thinking the word incarnation, and you'll know this being Spanish better than us English, but what does carne mean?
Carne mean?
Yeah, what does carne mean?
The soma, the body.
The soma, the body, yeah. And sometimes it means if you order something con carne, it's
Carne.
with meat, right? It's part of the flesh and the body.
Yeah.
And incarnation then it's taken us back into the meat, into the body, into the soma. And this is where this is a lot of the deep spiritual work is happening from that place there. And I hear what you're saying. It's a really, there's no lotus without the mud. We have to go into the murky, muddy depths of our feelings, our sensations. And there are guides, right? There are guides in towards our higher healing, but we have to go through and work with the trauma to do that. And this is why, isn't it? The spiritual bypassing looks like an attractive option, but with somebody, especially with more complex trauma, there's a lot of skill to be able to navigate and negotiate the terrain, the territory of trauma. And this is kind of the work that we're trying to do. And we mentioned brain spotting there. What's brain spotting given you, Mario, to be able to really try to work with the deeper subcortical and embodied parts of people's sense of self, spirituality, and trauma? How does brain spotting work with that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What brain spotting provides is very precise way to find an open window to access these deep experiences. Everything that happens in the body is mapped on the brain. Everything is mapped on the brain. We can find in this visual field. So no therapists do the same work with brain spotting. So it's not so simple as to use this stick or the pointer to find the eye position and promote this deep reprocessing and healing. It depends so much on the person who is attending, holding the therapist, and the perspective. That every therapist should first have their self-healing to be able to go into these deeper layers. Trauma is a silent scream in the body of ourselves, And another characteristic of trauma is avoidance. We became phobic to our experiences. So it's the therapist that the one that has to have the courage to go into these hells, client's hells, with strength, compassion, presence. So the therapist has the main task of helping many tasks, but helping first the brain of the client to perceive that now the external environment, the therapeutic relationship, is a safe place, and is a different reality in the present than in the past.
Mm.
That's prepared the brain, this subcortical brain, to not perceive the external environment as still a threat, and lower the activity enough for this prefrontal area to come in, which with this task of meta reflection, which is mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
Now the brain is ready to look inside, instead of reacting towards the outside, to come back, to look inside, and to do the task of self-healing. This is what Brainspotting provides, is this way of be very deeply attuned, finding these trauma capsules that could focus on trauma, but everyone should know that we can find also positive experiences or spiritual experiences. That's part of the understanding of the therapies. How much a client could handle with strong emotions or not, or if accessing or helping with activating a resource neural network to be at the same time active with the traumatic neural network. For this, brain spotting is so powerful.